Hello and welcome to the September 21 edition of the Influential Times podcast. As always, I'm joined by Jack. Hey Jack, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Hi everyone.
We've got a few stories to get through today. I will start with some updates from LinkedIn. Obviously, me and Jack have talked a lot this year about social media platforms jumping into social audio, and I think Jack's probably got a couple of updates around Clubhouse to go through. But the first one we noticed in September was LinkedIn announcing that they're going to get more involved in kind of online events. Obviously, back in March, they were talking about a wider sort of creator event strategy. I think this is going to be a big part of that. So what this will essentially involve is LinkedIn selling tickets, and organizers will be able to kind of monitor how sales are going. They can have their own dashboard to look at that. The main driver of this, of course, being that the majority of the workforce is still working remotely. I think probably in-person events have taken a little bit more time to get back to normal, especially when you look globally. Obviously, I think the UK is probably slightly ahead in that respect. But yeah, I think one of the big updates with this as well is that they're going to overhaul their kind of video and audio capabilities. It was announced, I think, last year, or no, so it was earlier this year, that they are one of the main investors in Hopin, which is a virtual events platform. So a few people saying that perhaps there might be some sort of integration there, and that's part of the reason why they've got involved there. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, I think this is an interesting move, Jack, and it's probably one that makes a lot of sense. Giving it some thought, I think one of the big values to the B2B brands will be, making things a bit more seamless. Obviously, if you host an event through LinkedIn and then you can connect with people, you can almost continue the conversation and, have your sales team following up with those leads. I think it'll probably make a much more seamless experience, won't it?
Yeah, for sure. I think, having it all in one place is definitely an advantage. I think there's probably always maybe there's a degree of drop off sometimes with that sort of thing where kind of people know that that's what's happening, and so that they can be a little bit more cautious. But I think that's always the trade-off. And if you offer most sales and marketing team the choice, it's probably I want the confirmed names so that I've actually got their LinkedIn profiles and I can see who I'm dealing with and who is and isn't worth going after. I think most people would accept that trade-off. So yeah, follows on from Twitter doing the same thing. I think the sort of some kind of live events is probably the new normal now. These kind of online events or figuring out how to do hybrid, and I guess the challenge is kind of upskilling teams, dealing with kind of everyone's at home Wi-Fi. How do you get the tech upgraded? All of that to kind of get the infrastructure in place to keep delivering it, because there's clearly demand to keep going, and LinkedIn are betting heavily on that. So an interesting one.
Big opportunity for the creators and influencers as well, I think, because if they're getting speaking sessions on these live events through LinkedIn, and then people can connect with the influencers straight away, and then they'll probably drive higher social engagement with their posts, their write-ups, and obviously we see influencers doing a lot of event follow-up activity. So I think it'll probably benefit the influencers as well.
Yeah, good integration with anyone who's got a newsletter already. I guess it's sort of similar, isn't it? It's being able to kind of either choose to monetize or deepen your relationship with your audience. Then you've kind of, if you're trying to get a booking for webinar engagements, you want to be hired more as a speaker, you've actually got some hard data to point to go, this is the type of attendance I can drive on my own. Bring me to your event. I can bring 200 people along on a rainy Tuesday evening in Stoke. So see what I can do. So that sort of on the topic of additional kind of live audio ticketing and things like that. My first story is around Clubhouse, if you remember them. And it's sort of easy to sound snide now, I think, about kind of where it's gone, and you sort of hear a lot of stories about struggles and scaling, and I think it's not uncommon. They sort of tried to take on a challenge where I think they correctly identified what the problem was, but it's just proving a little harder. And I think some of the other movers and shakers in that space were pretty quick to react as well, which I think is evidence of how right they were about the idea. And now they're just getting edged out very, very fast. So there's a story in The Verge about the sort of sponsorship program, their creator program that they had, really kind of struggling to just on an operational level to get going. The creators were just hoping for a lot of help with finding sponsors quickly. And then sort of the way that was set up wasn't very sophisticated. It was just kind of having to do ad reads live on the podcast and things like that. No real sort of targeting. Clubhouse doesn't have the audience demographics. So from an advertiser point of view, it's a bit, as a bet, it's okay. It's obviously highly engaged people in a Clubhouse, but if you don't know exactly who they are, you don't know where they live, what their age is, age, gender, income, location, job titles, any of that, all the things that advertisers want at least some idea of. It's a bit of a struggle, and we've seen Spotify, Twitter really kind of ramp up their efforts, and Spotify has had probably the best sort of advertising product when it comes to social audio, if you want to call it that, or podcasting, if you prefer to call it that. So yeah, I don't know, how do you feel about kind of Clubhouse's ongoing struggles? Do you think, was it inevitable, or do you think just slightly bad luck?
Yeah, I think it was inevitable really to an extent, wasn't it? I think it was a great idea, but I think there was just, with Twitter getting in there and LinkedIn, Spotify and other platforms who just have the clout really. I think there's something you mentioned on one of the previous pods about, the developer power of those other big companies. They can create what Clubhouse have done over probably a few months in like a day or a couple of weeks. So I guess it was always inevitable that they'd, sort of almost nick the idea really and kind of do it better, or with a bigger user base. So yeah, it was possibly inevitable.
Yeah, it's a shame, because I don't think there's any reason why kind of new platforms can't break through. You can just look at TikTok in the last 2 years has kind of gone from being a decent sized player like sort of Twitter or kind of LinkedIn with a specific function to being like a real bit of a behemoth, and in lots of ways sort of driving a lot of online culture. So it's doable. I guess it's rare. And that's not to completely write Clubhouse off, but it feels a little bit like it's going to be hard to persuade users to keep opening a different app on their phone. If you're getting, you can hear from the people you're interested in hearing from on 3 or 4 different apps on your phone, what's going to make you go there specifically, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be the question.
Yeah, so following on from that, I've got a story on TikTok actually. This week say again.
Speaking of.
Yeah, exactly. They're always cropping up, aren't they? This week they sort of announced that, well, it was announced in the news anyway, that they've started kind of penalizing members for sharing promotional content around cryptocurrency. So I think the thing here is that they're not trying to shut down influencers and creators. I think, TikTok is obviously a great place for creators. But what they are getting, hot on really is kind of, non-credible content. They don't want it to become a breeding ground for, financial scams. And with tons and tons, obviously there's some great, startups and financial services companies cropping up around crypto, which are really credible. But obviously they want to, make sure that they are credible and that they're not, there's no, I know with Instagram, I've had a lot of issues with crypto scams and things like that. So I think they're trying to just make sure that doesn't happen. But I think, the key message for those startups and brands is to really make sure they're building those credible influencer relationships, making sure there's a mutual interest between the brand and the influencer, and kind of moving away from, simple kind of brand or product promotion. That's the kind of key really. And obviously that's a message that we promote on Listica as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And be really hot on what the regulatory environment is. I was talking to someone about this on LinkedIn the other day. Someone tagged me in a post about this, because I think Kim Kardashian was sharing some, I think, crypto related brand on her channel, and it sort of sparks the usual discussion. It's kind of, it's interesting to see TikTok go this hard on it and kind of just fully clamp down. It's a bit like when Twitter sort of just said we're going to stop doing political ads because it's too hard to police this. It's too contentious. Let's just stop taking money. Let's stop making money out of kind of things where people might argue over the benefits. I guess if you're a sort of Chinese government watcher, you might say this proves what sort of has been said about TikTok in the past. The Chinese government seems to be cracking down quite hard on cryptocurrency. So you might say there's a sort of influence there. So people who are concerned about sort of Chinese government influence on TikTok might say, "See, we told you so." It's kind of bold to see them kind of fully ban a category, but yeah, I suppose at the same time, there's always calls for kind of more engagement from platforms on trying to stamp out misinformation. So
yeah, exactly.
It's useful to see the other side of what that can look like and how probably there's going to be people with interesting stuff to say that's perfectly worth listening to, who are maybe going to miss out on income from this, or maybe going to be sort of shut down. And another lesson in kind of no easy solutions, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
These category crackdowns do have an effect on the other side, and not everyone agrees on whether that's a good or a bad thing.
Yeah, I guess it's probably a case of just being quite strict initially, and then they might kind of ease things off as they go, to see how things go. But yeah,
maybe
interesting.
They can scale up their content moderation kind of abilities or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So my final story relates to something similar actually, and from no less an authority than Rand Fishkin, who you might know from as the founder of Moz. He now runs an organization called SparkToro, and he's sort of written a piece on his blog titled "The Incentives to Publish No Longer Reward the Web's Creators," and it's kind of on a similar theme. It's he's kind of arguing that more and more content is now getting essentially just goes completely unnoticed online. We've completely democratized the ability to create. It's not like 8th century Europe, where if you want to read a book, you got to go to a monastery where there's a bunch of guys with the little bit of their hair cut out in a monastery, all writing it out, and that's the only place to get a book, and only a very rich person can have it. We've got incredibly democratized access to content. So it's probably true that there's people making fantastic stuff that never gets noticed. And he's kind of, noting how, for example, LinkedIn is known to punish people for sharing links. Your content will not travel as far if it contains links potentially, and kind of just, I guess he's issuing a little bit of a rallying cry and kind of saying, can we try and push back against this a little bit. I think it's kind of another lesson in how this, all platforms are going to act in their own self-interest to an extent. They want you to stay on their platform. For creators, that can create a tricky environment. Friend of the show, Scott Galloway, I know I probably cite him every other week, but it's just a phrase that always sticks with me. It's kind of a phrase: don't build on rented land with your sort of platforms as a creator, always thinking about how you have your own kind of intellectual property and your own, websites. We spent this whole podcast talking about all the ways that LinkedIn or Clubhouse or Spotify can offer you all these magical services, but useful to remember for creators, I think it's always on rented land. You're kind of using someone else's service to access your audience. So always be thinking about how you about how you can still have your own presence and your own direct connection to your audience, because it can get taken away. So encourage people to read that. Worth thinking about what it's like for creators out there, for any marketers listening, kind of what the environment's like. And for me, my big takeaway from marketers would be really remember that people creating great stuff might still be struggling to kind of build those big audiences. It's probably a little harder than it was 5 years ago to build a big audience. So be willing to kind of, particularly if you're looking for content creators, experts, be willing to dig in a little bit and sort of go past just who's got loads of followers and the mega engagement, and kind of look who's got engagement on the right stuff, who's getting the conversation going, and who's kind of sharing interesting things. So that would be my kind of, that's what I was thinking about while I read Mr. Fishkin's article.
Cool. Yes, that's everything from us. We will also have a bonus story in our newsletter, so do look out for that. And yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.